The boardroom was falling apart. Richard Blackwood, Billionaire CEO, was trying to translate for his mother, Eleanor. She's deaf since childhood, signing rapidly about the $50 million project. But Richard's basic sign language wasn't enough. He was missing half her words. Bradford Sterling, second-largest shareholder, waved dismissively at Eleanor. "Richard, maybe you should have brought a real interpreter. This is embarrassing." He turned to Eleanor like she was confused. "Don't worry, honey. The real adults will handle this." Eleanor's hands moved faster, desperate. Nobody was watching. The board had tuned out. Then a voice from the corner. "That's not fair." Every head turned. A 10-year-old black boy stood near the door. Worn jacket, Devin Anderson, the cleaning lady's son. He was about to step in. What that 10-year-old did next exposed a $2 million fraud and made a billionaire cry. 20 minutes earlier, Rosa Martinez had clocked in at Blackwood Enterprises at 6 in the morning. She was one of 12 custodial staff responsible for 42 floors of Manhattan real estate. Her supervisor asked her to stay late for a big board meeting on the executive level. Rosa said yes, she needed the overtime. Every dollar went into an envelope labeled Alicia's Future. Her deaf daughter's cochlear implant consultation in 3 months could cost $80,000. She'd brought Devin because the after-school program was closed. He was supposed to wait in the break room on the 38th floor, doing homework, staying invisible. But Devin got curious. He followed voices up the service stairwell and found himself outside the biggest boardroom he'd ever seen. Devin Anderson was small for 10 years old, barely 4'8", wearing a navy jacket 2 years old with frayed cuffs. His sneakers came from the PS 122 donation bin in Harlem, where he was a top 5th grade student despite missing school twice monthly to care for his sister when Rosa worked doubles. He'd learned early how to be invisible, how to read a room and understand power dynamics. But he'd also learned something that was about to make invisibility impossible. For 3 years, since Alicia was born deaf, Devin had been learning American Sign Language, from YouTube videos at the library, from books he read by flashlight under his blankets, from Miss Patricia, a retired UN interpreter who volunteered at the community center and recognized something special in the quiet boy asking questions nobody else thought to ask. Mostly, he'd learned from Alicia. 3 hours daily after school, while Rosa worked her diner job, Devin was his sister's voice, ears, and bridge to a world not built for her. He'd learned to read not just signs, but facial expressions that changed meaning. Signing speed indicating emotion. Regional variations making ASL as complex as any spoken language. Now, watching through the glass door, Devin saw something that tightened his stomach. A woman was signing. Fast, fluent, complex ASL with decades of precision. The man translating, her son, was getting it completely wrong. Inside, Eleanor Blackwood was explaining that profit shouldn't be measured only in dollars, that community investment was sustainable future investment. Richard was translating it as potential profit in the long run. She signed about human dignity and social responsibility. He reduced it to return on investment. Eleanor had built Blackwood Enterprises from $5,000 borrowed from a Queens credit union 50 years ago. 26 years old, deaf since childhood meningitis, determined to prove disability didn't mean inability. She'd started flipping one Brooklyn apartment, then 5, then buildings. By 40, she owned property across 3 boroughs. By 60, she managed a portfolio worth hundreds of millions. But her greatest asset had become her greatest liability. In fast-paced corporate real estate, where deals happened through rapid conversation and handshakes, Eleanor's deafness increasingly pushed her to the margins. She'd tried teaching Richard sign language when he was young, but he'd been resistant, embarrassed by his mother's difference. He'd learned enough for family settings, nowhere near enough for complex business concepts. Bradford Sterling had waited months for this moment. He'd joined the board 3 years ago after buying 12% stake, making him second-largest shareholder after Eleanor's trust. 45 years old, Yale-educated, inherited his first $10 million from his grandfather's textile fortune. He wore suits costing more than Rosa made in 3 months, drove a Bentley, and believed with absolute certainty that people like him were meant to run the world. He'd been systematically undermining Eleanor's authority for a year. questioning her decisions, suggesting time for fresh perspectives and younger leadership, making comments about how challenging it must be for Richard to carry the burden of a mother who couldn't participate fully, all sounding concerned but carrying contempt's sharp edge. Today's meeting would decide a $50 million affordable housing investment in the South Bronx. Eleanor's passion project, 18 months in planning, 300 units for low-income families, community center, free healthcare clinic, job training programs, modest ROI compared to luxury developments, but enormous social impact. Bradford had the votes to kill it. He'd worked other board members for weeks, arguing that philanthropic gestures were fine personally, but companies had fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value. He'd prepared spreadsheets showing 22% return from luxury condos on the same land versus Eleanor's 8% affordable housing return. The professional ASL interpreter who was supposed to attend had called in sick that morning. Car accident on the FDR, minor injuries but enough for the ER. Richard assured everyone he could translate. Bradford smiled and said, of course, whatever made Eleanor comfortable. He'd been counting on Richard's inadequate translation, counting on confusion and miscommunication, counting on using Eleanor's deafness as evidence she was no longer competent for major corporate decisions. What Bradford hadn't counted on was the 10-year-old watching through glass, the boy who'd just heard him mock and dismiss a deaf woman, the boy whose hands were clenching, remembering every time someone treated his sister Alicia the same way. Devin had spent 3 years finding his voice by giving one to his sister. He'd promised her he'd never let anyone make her invisible. That promise extended to every deaf person ever dismissed, ignored, or treated like they didn't matter. That promise was about to walk through the door. The moment Devin pushed open the door, 12 heads turned. A 10-year-old in a worn jacket standing where he had no business being. "Excuse me," Richard said, trying to sound kind while being dismissive. "You can't be in here. This is a private meeting." Devin's voice came out smaller than intended. "I'm sorry, sir, but that's not what your mother said." The room went silent. "What?" Richard stood. "Just now, when she was signing. You translated it wrong. She wasn't talking about profit potential. She was talking about social responsibility and sustainable community investment." Bradford Sterling laughed without humor. "Oh, this is rich. Business advice from children?" He turned to Richard with exaggerated sympathy. "Are we really hiring from elementary schools now? He's not hired. I don't even know who he is." "I'm Devin Anderson, sir. My mother is Rosa Martinez. She works in custodial. I was waiting downstairs and heard the meeting and saw that Mrs. Blackwood wasn't being understood. That's not right." Eleanor leaned forward. Her hands moved quickly, signing at Devin. "A question. A test." Without thinking, Devin's hands responded in fluent ASL. "I can understand you. I can help." Eleanor's eyes widened. She signed faster, more complex. Devin translated aloud. "She's asking how I learned sign language. She wants to know if I'm a professional interpreter." "This is ridiculous," Bradford said, standing. "Richard, get this kid out before I call security." But Eleanor was signing urgently to Richard. He watched his mother's hands, catching maybe one word in 5, frustration growing. "Mom, I can't. Slow down." "She's saying she wants to let me try," Devin said quietly. "If there's someone here who can actually understand her, she'd like to have a real voice for once." Bradford's laugh was sharp and mean. "Okay, I'll bite. This should be entertaining." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "Tell you what, kid. If you can really understand her, and I mean really, not just making up what sounds good, prove it right now. But here's the deal." His smile was all teeth. "If you're wasting our time, your mama loses her job. Right here, right now. If you're right, though, I'll personally donate $100,000 to any charity Eleanor wants." "Bradford, that's completely inappropriate," Dr. Catherine Wilson started. "If he's right," Bradford continued, talking over her, "if he miraculously can translate better than her own son, we'll all be amazed. How's that for stakes?" Rosa appeared in the doorway, face pale, hands clutched white-knuckle tight. "Devin, mijo, come away." But Devin was looking at Eleanor. And Eleanor was looking back with something he recognized, the same exhausted desperation Alicia had when kids mocked her hearing aids. Someone who'd spent their whole life trying to be heard. Eleanor signed one sentence, slow and deliberate. Devin translated without hesitation. She says, "Let's begin." The entire room held its breath. 3 years ago, Devin's life changed on a Tuesday in October. 7 years old, sitting in Harlem Hospital's waiting room, legs swinging because they didn't reach the floor. His mother had been in delivery for 6 hours. When the nurse finally came, she was smiling. "You have a baby sister, come meet her." Alicia Rosa Anderson weighed 6 pounds, 4 ounces. Dark hair like their mother. A grip surprisingly strong. Devin had held her with terrified gentleness, something infinitely precious and breakable. She'd opened her eyes and looked at him. He'd fallen completely in love. Their father had been gone 2 years. He'd left when Devin was 5, wanting a different life, an easier life. One without grinding Brooklyn poverty and overnight shifts and maxed-out credit cards. When Alicia was 4 months old, Rosa noticed something wrong. The baby didn't startle at loud noises, didn't turn toward voices. The audiologist delivered the diagnosis with clinical gentleness: profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. Born deaf. Nothing to fix, only manage. Rosa cried for 3 days, not because she didn't love her daughter, but because she understood what the world would do to a deaf child when they could barely afford rent. She researched cochlear implants, therapies, special education. Everything cost money they didn't have. Devin, 7 years old, understood enough to be scared. His sister was different. The world wasn't kind to different. He'd started researching on library computers after school. Typed "how to talk to deaf baby" into Google and fell down a rabbit hole defining the next 3 years. American Sign Language, deaf culture, videos of deaf children communicating with families, deaf adults advocating for their community. He found a channel run by a deaf woman named Sarah teaching basic ASL to hearing parents. Devin watched every video, practiced in the bathroom mirror, small hands stumbling through the alphabet, then words, then sentences. When Alicia was 8 months old, Devin signed milk to her. She stared at his hands. 3 days later, she signed it back. Rosa found them in the kitchen, Devin barely tall enough to reach the counter, signing to his baby sister in her high chair. Both completely focused on each other's hands. Rosa started crying again, this time from relief. Devin spent every free moment studying. He found Miss Patricia at the community center when he was 8. She was a retired UN interpreter, 60-something, 20 years of professional experience. She'd seen him practicing signs in the corner and asked if he had a deaf family member. When he told her about Alicia, she offered weekly tutoring, free, because every deaf child deserved family members who could communicate fluently. Miss Patricia was rigorous and demanding. She taught not just signs, but grammar structure, regional dialects, facial expressions, cultural context that made ASL a complete language, not just hand gestures. She made him practice until his hands ached, corrected improper classifiers, pushed him to think in ASL, not translate English into signs. By 9, Devin was interpreting Alicia's doctor appointments, parent-teacher conferences at her deaf preschool, phone calls with family in Mexico. Rosa wanted to update. He'd become his sister's voice, and found a purpose bigger than himself. Miss Patricia told him once, "The best interpreters don't just translate words, Devin. They translate intent, emotion, dignity. They give people back their agency." Devin carried that like a promise. Every deaf person deserved to be heard. Every voice mattered. If the world wasn't listening, someone needed to step in and make them listen. Standing in that boardroom, watching Eleanor's desperate hands and Bradford's contemptuous face, Devin heard Miss Patricia's voice again. Someone needs to step in. He'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment without knowing it was coming. Let me add more emotional depth. 3 years ago, Devin's life changed on a Tuesday in October. 7 years old, sitting in Harlem Hospital's waiting room, legs swinging because they didn't reach the floor. His mother had been in delivery for 6 hours. When the nurse finally came, she was smiling. "You have a baby sister. Come meet her." Alicia Rosa Anderson weighed 6 pounds, 4 ounces. Dark hair like their mother, a grip surprisingly strong. Devin had held her with terrified gentleness, something infinitely precious and breakable. She'd opened her eyes and looked at him. He'd fallen completely in love. Their father had been gone 2 years. He'd left when Devin was 5, wanting a different life, an easier life. One without grinding Brooklyn poverty and overnight shifts and maxed-out credit cards for groceries. When Alicia was 4 months old, Rosa noticed something wrong. The baby didn't startle at loud noises, didn't turn toward voices. The audiologist delivered the diagnosis with clinical gentleness: profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. Born deaf, nothing to fix, only manage. Rosa cried for 3 days, not because she didn't love her daughter, but because she understood what the world would do to a deaf child when they could barely afford rent. She researched cochlear implants, therapies, special education. Everything cost money they didn't have. Devin, 7 years old, understood enough to be scared. His sister was different. The world wasn't kind to different. He'd started researching on library computers after school, typed "how to talk to deaf baby" into Google, and fell down a rabbit hole defining the next 3 years. American Sign Language, deaf culture, videos of deaf children communicating with families, deaf adults advocating for their community. He found a channel run by a deaf woman named Sarah teaching basic ASL to hearing parents. Devin watched every video, practiced in the bathroom mirror, small hands stumbling through the alphabet, then words, then sentences. When Alicia was 8 months old, Devin signed milk to her. She stared at his hands. 3 days later, she signed it back. Rosa found them in the kitchen, Devin, barely tall enough to reach the counter, signing to his baby sister in her high chair, both completely focused on each other's hands. Rosa started crying again, this time from relief. The learning curve was steep. Devin spent every free moment studying. He found Miss Patricia at the community center when he was 8. She was a retired UN interpreter, 60-something, 20 years at the UN. She'd seen him practicing signs in the corner and asked if he had a deaf family member. When he told her about Alicia, she offered weekly tutoring. Free. Because every deaf child deserved family members who could communicate fluently. Miss Patricia was rigorous and demanding. She taught not just signs, but grammar structure, regional dialects, facial expressions, cultural context, making ASL a complete language, not just hand gestures. She made him practice until his hands ached, corrected improper classifiers, pushed him to think in ASL, not translate English into signs. By 9, Devin was interpreting Alicia's doctor appointments, parent-teacher conferences at her deaf preschool, phone calls with family in Mexico. Rosa wanted to update about the kids. He'd become his sister's voice and found a purpose bigger than himself. Miss Patricia told him once, "The best interpreters don't just translate words, Devin. They translate intent, emotion, dignity. They give people back their agency." Devin carried that like a promise. Every deaf person deserved to be heard. Every voice mattered. If the world wasn't listening, someone needed to step in and make them listen. The hardest days were when Alicia came home from preschool crying because kids called her weird for her hand movements, or when she asked Devin through signs why she was different, why she couldn't hear music like other kids, why her father left. Those were the nights Devin practiced harder, studied longer, because he'd made a promise to his baby sister. She would never be invisible. She would always have a voice, even if that voice had to be his. Standing in that boardroom, watching Eleanor's desperate hands and Bradford's contemptuous face, Devin heard Miss Patricia's voice again. Someone needs to step in. He'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment without knowing it was coming. Eleanor Blackwood's hands moved through the air with precision born of 68 years of use. She signed a complete thought, 2 sentences carrying nuance and complexity, the kind requiring understanding of context and intention. Richard watched his mother's hands, face creasing with concentration and frustration. She says something about money isn't everything, and the future, or investing. It wasn't close. Bradford smirked. Brilliant translation, Richard. Very specific. I'm sure we can build a $50 million strategy around money isn't everything. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Wilson leaned forward, watching Devin with sharp interest. Devin took a breath and stepped fully into the room. Mrs. Blackwood said, "Profit is not measured only in dollars and cents. Investing in community infrastructure is investing in sustainable futures that benefit everyone, including our company's long-term reputation and stability." The room went silent. Eleanor's head snapped toward Devin. She signed quickly, a question. "She's asking if I really understood all that or if I guessed," Devin translated. He signed directly to Eleanor. "I understood completely. I can help you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She signed elaborately. "She's thanking me. She says it's been a long time since someone understood her properly in a business setting. Devin paused. She wants to continue the presentation. She has important information about the South Bronx project that hasn't been communicated accurately. Bradford's smirk faded slightly. Okay, that was cute. But lucky guesses won't cut it here, kid. This is business, not Dr. Seuss. Then test me, Devin said quietly. Oh, I will. Oh. Bradford leaned forward. Richard, ask your mother about the specific financial breakdown, budget allocation, timeline, ROI projections. Let's see if our little interpreter can handle actual business terminology. Richard signed to his mother, but his signs were clumsy and imprecise. Eleanor watched with visible frustration, then began signing rapidly, her hands moving through complex spatial references and numerical classifiers representing buildings, budgets, and demographics. Richard was lost within seconds. Mom, slower, I don't... Devin's voice cut in, clear and organized. Mrs. Blackwood is explaining the project architecture. 3 buildings on a 2-acre site in the South Bronx. Building A, 120 units focused on single-parent families. Building B, 100 units for elderly residents with ground-floor accessible facilities. Building C, 80 units for people with disabilities, fully ADA compliant. Total 300 units. He paused, his hands unconsciously mirroring Eleanor's signs. Budget breakdown, $50 million total. $34 million construction, $8 million for community facilities including health clinic, job training center, children's education programs, $6 million for ongoing operations and maintenance for the first 3 years, $2 million contingency fund. Dr. Wilson was typing rapidly on her tablet. She looked up, eyes wide. That's exactly what's in Eleanor's written proposal, word for word, down to specific budget categories. Board members exchanged glances. Gregory Taylor, on the board 15 years, spoke up. How does a 10-year-old know technical ASL well enough to translate financial terminology? Bradford jumped in. He doesn't. He obviously memorized Eleanor's proposal somehow. This is staged. I've never seen Mrs. Blackwood's proposal, Devin said. I'm just translating what she's signing right now. Prove it. Bradford's voice had an edge. Richard, I'm going to ask Eleanor something she can't have prepared for. Something not in any written proposal. Ask her about property tax implications in year 3, accounting for the city's projected tax rate increases and potential market fluctuations. A trap. Complex enough that even if Devin had seen Eleanor's proposal, it wouldn't cover this specific hypothetical. Richard would have to sign it, and odds were he'd mangle the question so badly Eleanor's answer wouldn't make sense. Richard signed to his mother, struggling with terminology. Devin could see him leaving out words, simplifying concepts because he didn't know proper classifiers, but Eleanor understood enough. She paused, thinking, hands still. Then she began signing a detailed response, face showing concentration of someone doing complex mental calculations. Devin watched carefully, processing not just signs but grammatical structure and spatial reasoning. Mrs. Blackwood says property taxes will increase approximately 3.2% annually based on the city's historical patterns. However, the affordable housing project qualifies for New York State tax credits under the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which will offset the increases. When you factor in federal tax benefits and the city's inclusionary zoning bonuses, the net impact is actually savings of approximately $1.8 million over the first 5-year period. Dead silence. Dr. Wilson checked her tablet, pulling up what looked like a tax analysis spreadsheet. Her face paled. He's absolutely correct. Those are exact numbers from the financial consultant's tax impact report. Eleanor, did you memorize all this? Eleanor signed with a small smile. Devin translated. She says she built an $800 million company by understanding numbers. Just because she can't hear doesn't mean she can't calculate. Bradford's face was turning red. This doesn't prove anything. But the doubt in his voice was clear. For the first time all meeting, he looked uncertain. Richard was staring at Devin like he'd never seen him before. How are you doing this? Devin met his eyes. I'm just listening, sir. Really listening. Bradford Sterling stood, his 6'2" frame designed to intimidate. He walked around the table until he was standing feet from Devin. The power move was obvious. The 10-year-old had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. Okay, smart kid, let's see if you can handle this. Bradford's voice shifted from dismissive to aggressive. I'm going to create a scenario, a complex financial crisis, and I want you to interpret it for Eleanor and bring back her response. If you get even one detail wrong, you're done, and your mother's done. Understood? Rosa's voice came from the doorway, strained and frightened. Bradford, please. He's just a child. Then he shouldn't be playing in adult spaces. Bradford didn't even look at her. Richard, ask your mother the following. If interest rates spike to 8% next quarter, and construction costs increase 15% due to supply chain disruptions, what's her contingency plan for keeping the project financially viable? And I want specifics, not vague platitudes about believing in the community. Designed to be impossible. Multiple variables, hypothetical scenarios requiring deep knowledge of construction finance, interest mechanisms, risk management, the kind of question making even experienced executives pause. Richard attempted to sign the question, but his vocabulary was so limited he was essentially asking, what if money problems happen? Eleanor looked frustrated, signed something back asking for clarification. Bradford smiled. See? Even with her son translating, she can't understand a complex business question. That's because the question wasn't translated properly, Devon said. Evan. He turned to Eleanor and began signing. His hands moved with confidence born of 3 years learning that precision mattered. He fingerspelled interest rate and supply chain because those were technical terms, then used proper classifiers for increase and percentage change. He built the hypothetical scenario spatially, using signing space to represent different financial variables. Eleanor's eyes lit with understanding. She nodded sharply, then began signing a response. Not a simple answer. A complete financial strategy. Devon watched, processing, then turned to translate. Mrs. Blackwood says Mr. Sterling's question is based on a faulty premise. The company has already locked interest rates at 4.2% for 3 years through a forward rate agreement with Chase Bank. As for construction materials, she personally negotiated fixed-price contracts with 3 primary suppliers back in September, specifically to hedge against supply chain volatility that anyone paying attention to the market could see coming. Bradford's confident expression cracked slightly. Eleanor kept signing. Devon continued translating, voice gaining strength. She's now asking a question back. Did Mr. Sterling actually read the full 81-page impact study she commissioned from Columbia University's Urban Planning Department? Or did he only read the 3-page executive summary? Dr. Wilson let out a surprised laugh. Another board member coughed to cover what might have been a chuckle. Bradford's face flushed. I reviewed the relevant sections. Eleanor signed again, sharply. Mrs. Blackwood says the relevant sections are the 78 pages of detailed analysis Mr. Sterling apparently skipped. Devon translated. Those pages explain exactly how she's planned for multiple risk scenarios, including the ones he just mentioned. She says if he'd read them, he wouldn't be asking questions already answered. The power dynamic was shifting. Board members who'd been checking phones were now paying full attention. Dr. Wilson was openly smiling. Richard looked like he was watching his understanding of his mother completely transform. Bradford's voice went cold. This is ridiculous. A 10-year-old street kid from Harlem suddenly speaks fluent ASL and understands corporate finance? Eleanor, are you even sure he's translating accurately? He could be making up whatever sounds intelligent. The comment was calculated cruelty, suggesting Eleanor couldn't even trust her own interpreter, that her deafness made her inherently vulnerable to manipulation. Eleanor's face went hard. She signed something sharp and quick. Devon's voice matched her intensity. Mrs. Blackwood says that's exactly what someone says when they're losing an argument. Attack the interpreter because you can't attack the message. I'm asking legitimate questions about credibility, Bradford said. For all we know, you two rehearsed this. You're probably her charity case, some feel-good diversity initiative. Devon felt anger flash hot in his chest, but kept his voice level. If you don't trust my translation, test it. Write a sentence, any sentence. Give it to Mrs. Blackwood to read. She'll sign it back. I'll translate. That way you'll know whether I'm honest. Bradford's eyes gleamed. Fine. He pulled out a notepad and wrote for a full minute, clearly crafting something as complex and jargon-heavy as possible. When he finished, he handed it to Eleanor with exaggerated courtesy. Please read this and sign your response. Eleanor read. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Then she began signing, face showing both comprehension and contempt. Devin watched carefully. Bradford had written, "The fiduciary responsibility of this board supersedes emotional decision-making, and we must prioritize quantifiable shareholder value over nebulous philanthropic endeavors that cannot demonstrate clear return on investment within acceptable timeframes. Corporates speak for, we care about money, not people." Eleanor understood it perfectly. Devin translated, "Mrs. Blackwood understands what you wrote. She says you're using big words to hide a small idea. She agrees the board has fiduciary responsibility, but she asks, how do you define value? If shareholder value means only this quarter's stock price, then yes, this project isn't optimal. But if value includes brand reputation, employee morale, community goodwill, and long-term market stability, then this project is invaluable." And she wants to know, when Mr. Sterling talks about acceptable timeframes, is he talking about the company's future, or just the time until his next bonus vests? The room erupted. Dr. Wilson clapped. Two other board members grinned. Gregory Taylor said loudly, "Eleanor, that's the best response to Bradford's nonsense I've heard in 3 years." Bradford's face went purple. "This is a setup!" Dr. Catherine Wilson stood from her chair. 58 years old, former social worker who'd made a fortune in non-profit consulting before joining corporate boards. She'd been the only voice consistently questioning Bradford's aggressive tactics. Now she looked at him with open disgust. "Bradford, that's enough. This child has demonstrated more professionalism and competence than you've shown this entire meeting." She turned to the rest of the board. "For 3 years, I've watched us sideline Eleanor because communication was difficult. Because it was easier to let Richard give simplified summaries than actually ensure we understood her complete vision. We failed her. We failed our fiduciary duty to hear from our largest shareholder. And a 10-year-old just showed us exactly how badly." Richard stood, walked to his mother, and knelt beside her chair. He signed something. Slowly, imperfectly, but with clear emotion. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have learned better. I should have tried harder." Eleanor's hands moved in response. Devin translated without being asked. "She says it's not your fault. She knows you tried, but trying isn't enough. This is the first time she's felt truly heard in years." Margaret Foster, another board member, spoke up. "Eleanor, I need to apologize. I voted against several of your initiatives, not because I disagreed with the vision, but because I genuinely didn't understand what you were proposing. I thought the communication barrier meant... I'm ashamed to say I thought it meant the ideas weren't fully formed. I was wrong." Bradford was looking around the room, watching his support crumble. "You're all being manipulated by emotion. This is business. This is business," Gregory Taylor interrupted. "Eleanor built this company on instinct, intelligence, and understanding people. Those skills don't require hearing, they require attention. Something you've never given her." Eleanor began signing again. Not to Devin, but to the entire room. She stood, moved to the head of the table where the presentation screen was, and began a full presentation in ASL. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd been waiting years to finally be understood. Devin stood beside her, translating in real time like a professional interpreter. She's saying, "This project is not charity, it's justice, recognizing that stable housing creates stable communities, which create stable economies. The 300 families who will live in these buildings will have children who go to better schools. They'll have healthcare access, preventing emergency room visits. They'll have job training, creating taxpayers instead of people dependent on social services. The return on investment isn't measured in one quarterly report. It's measured in generations." Eleanor's signing became more animated, more emotional. Devin matched her energy. She grew up poor in Queens. She knows what it's like to be invisible, to have people talk about you instead of to you. When she lost her hearing at age 8, the world stopped listening completely. People assumed deaf meant stupid. They made decisions for her instead of with her. She built this company by refusing to be invisible. This housing project is about refusing to let 300 families be invisible. Eleanor signed her final point. Devin delivered it with quiet power. She says, "Profit without purpose is just greed, and she didn't build this company on greed." The room erupted in applause. Dr. Catherine Wilson stood from her chair. She was 58, a former social worker who'd made a fortune in nonprofit consulting. She'd been the only voice consistently questioning Bradford's tactics. Now she looked at him with open disgust. "Bradford, that's enough. This child has demonstrated more professionalism and competence than you've shown this entire meeting." She turned to the board. "For 3 years, I've watched us sideline Eleanor because communication was difficult, because it was easier to let Richard give simplified summaries than actually ensure we understood her complete vision. We failed her, and a 10-year-old just showed us exactly how badly." Richard stood, walked to his mother, and knelt beside her chair. He signed something, slowly, imperfectly, but with clear emotion. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have learned better." Eleanor's hands moved in response. Devin translated without being asked. "She says it's not your fault. She knows you tried. But this is the first time she's felt truly heard in years." Margaret Foster spoke up. "Eleanor, I need to apologize. I voted against several of your initiatives, not because I disagreed, but because I genuinely didn't understand what you were proposing. I thought the communication barrier meant the ideas weren't fully formed. I was wrong." Bradford was looking around, watching his support crumble. "You're all being manipulated by emotion. This is business," Gregory Taylor interrupted. "Eleanor built this company on instinct, intelligence, and understanding people. Those skills don't require hearing. They require attention, something you've never given her." Eleanor began signing again, not to Devin, but to the entire room. She stood, moved to the head of the table, and began a full presentation in ASL. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd been waiting years to finally be understood. Devin stood beside her, translating in real time like a professional interpreter. "She's saying, this project is not charity, it's justice. Recognizing that stable housing creates stable communities, which create stable economies. The 300 families who'll live in these buildings will have children who go to better schools, healthcare access preventing emergency room visits, job training creating taxpayers instead of people dependent on social services. The return on investment isn't measured in one quarterly report, it's measured in generations." Eleanor's signing became more animated, emotional. Devin matched her energy. She grew up poor in Queens. She knows what it's like to be invisible, to have people talk about you instead of to you. When she lost her hearing at 8, the world stopped listening. People assumed deaf meant stupid. They made decisions for her instead of with her. She built this company by refusing to be invisible. This housing project is about refusing to let 300 families be invisible. Eleanor signed her final point. Devin delivered it with quiet power. She says, "Profit without purpose is just greed, and she didn't build this company on greed." The room erupted in applause. Bradford Sterling's hands were shaking. The room that had been his to control 15 minutes ago had completely turned, but he had one card left, and he was desperate enough to play it. "Stop!" His voice cut through the applause. "This is emotional manipulation. You're all so busy crying about heartwarming stories that you're forgetting basic corporate governance." He pointed at Eleanor. "She's 76 years old. She's deaf, and clearly declining mentally. I motion for an immediate competency evaluation. This vote should be postponed until we can verify she's actually capable of making informed decisions about $50 million. The room went ice cold. It was a nuclear option, crossing every line of decency. Dr. Wilson's voice was furious. "Bradford, you are out of—" Eleanor's hand rose, stopping her. The older woman's face was calm, but her eyes were steel. She began signing, slowly, deliberately, with controlled rage more powerful than any shout. Devin translated, his voice carrying every ounce of her anger. "She says, Mr. Sterling, I have been deaf for 68 years. Not one single day have I allowed it to define my intelligence. I built this company from 5,000 borrowed dollars into an $800 million empire. I can read a financial statement better than you. I understand people better than you. I understand markets better than you. And I understand something you clearly don't, that competence and compassion are not mutually exclusive." Eleanor's hands moved faster now, more intense. "For the past 6 months, I've noticed discrepancies in our Q2 and Q3 financial reports. Small things. Vendor payments that didn't quite match invoices, expense reports with unusual patterns. So I did what I've always done when something doesn't add up. I hired a private auditor, someone with no connection to this board, someone who could look at our books with fresh eyes. Bradford's face had gone from red to white. The audit report is in the drawer of this conference table. Right side, third drawer down. Richard, would you get it, please? Richard opened the drawer, pulled out a thick manila envelope. Dr. Wilson took it, opened it, and began reading. Her expression shifted from curious to shocked to furious in 30 seconds. Bradford, Dr. Wilson's voice was shaking. Did you really expense your yacht club membership as client entertainment? Did you create fake vendor invoices for consulting services that never happened? Did you embezzle $2.3 million from this company over 18 months? The room exploded. Board members were talking over each other, demanding to see the report. Bradford was backing toward the door, his confident facade shattered. Eleanor kept signing. Devin kept translating, voice growing stronger. Mrs. Blackwood says, you thought because I'm deaf I wasn't paying attention. You thought because I couldn't participate easily in meetings, I didn't know what was happening. You were wrong. I don't need ears to see patterns in numbers. I don't need a voice to expose theft, and I don't need you to speak for me. Devin paused as Eleanor's hands formed the final signs. Because I have a voice, right here. Bradford made one last desperate attempt. He looked at Devin with pure venom. You think you've won something, boy? You're just a poor black kid who'll end up exactly like your mama, cleaning toilets for people like me. You don't belong in places like this. The room gasped. The mask had come completely off. Devin stood straighter. He looked Bradford directly in the eyes and signed as he spoke, hands and voice perfectly synchronized. You're right that I don't belong, not in a place where people like you make decisions. But Mrs. Blackwood belongs. My sister belongs. Every person you've ever dismissed or underestimated belongs, and we're not going anywhere. He took a breath. Sometimes the weakest piece makes the winning move. You never saw me coming, Mr. Sterling. That's your mistake, not mine. Eleanor stood, walked to Devin, and pulled him into a hug. The entire board stood and applauded, everyone except Bradford, who was already heading for the door. Security will escort you out, Dr. Wilson said coldly. Don't bother coming back. After Bradford left, escorted by 2 security guards, the energy in the room shifted. The adrenaline drained, leaving something quieter and more profound. Dr. Wilson made a formal motion. I move to remove Bradford Sterling from this board effective immediately, pending full investigation into the financial irregularities detailed in Eleanor's audit report. All in favor? Every hand went up. Unanimous. I'll be contacting our attorneys within the hour, Dr. Wilson said. And the district attorney's office. This is criminal fraud. Eleanor sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. She signed something to Devin, and he pulled up a chair beside her. They had a conversation in ASL, hands moving in a private language nobody else could fully follow, but the emotion was clear. Gratitude, connection, understanding. Finally, Devin turned to translate. Mrs. Blackwood is asking me how old I am, how long I've been learning ASL. She wants to know about my sister. For the next 5 minutes, Devin told them about Alicia, about learning from YouTube videos and library books, about Miss Patricia at the community center who'd seen potential in a scared 8-year-old boy, about hours practicing until his hands ached, about becoming his sister's voice because the world wasn't built for deaf children. She taught me something, Devin said quietly. My sister. She signs to me, don't pity me, just listen to me. That's all she wants. That's all any deaf person wants. Not pity, not charity, just respect, just being heard. Eleanor signed again, tears running down her face. Devin translated. Mrs. Blackwood says Miss Patricia would be proud of me and that my sister is lucky to have me. Rosa was invited into the boardroom. She'd been standing outside, terrified and proud and overwhelmed. Eleanor signed to her directly, and Devin translated. She says you raised an extraordinary son, that his compassion and intelligence didn't come from nowhere, they came from you. She says you should be very proud. Rosa started crying, pulling Devin into a hug that lifted him off the ground. Mijo, mi amor, you were so brave. Richard knelt beside his mother again. This time he didn't try to sign. He just spoke, knowing Devin would translate. "Mom, I failed you. For years, I told myself I knew enough sign language to get by. But I was lazy. I was embarrassed, and I let my embarrassment become your isolation. I'm so sorry." Eleanor's response was gentle. Devin translated. She says, "You tried. That matters. But trying isn't enough anymore. Starting tomorrow, you're hiring a full-time ASL interpreter for this company, and you're going to take professional lessons, real lessons, no more excuses." "I promise," Richard said. "Every day, I swear." Dr. Wilson addressed the room. "This board has failed Eleanor for years. We let communication barriers become an excuse for exclusion. We assumed difficulty meant inability. We were lazy, we were ableist, and we were wrong." She looked at each board member. "From this day forward, every single meeting will have professional ASL interpretation. We'll implement it company-wide, and we'll actively recruit deaf and hard-of-hearing employees at every level." Margaret Foster added, "And we'll fund a scholarship program for kids who want to become interpreters. Kids like Devin who understand that language is about more than words, it's about dignity." Eleanor signed something with a small smile. Devin translated. "She says it only took 10 years and a child to teach you all what she's been trying to say from the beginning." The room laughed, the sound carrying both shame and hope. Gregory Taylor spoke up. "All in favor of approving Eleanor's South Bronx affordable housing project?" Every hand rose, unanimous again. "Approved," Dr. Wilson said. $50 million. Let's build something that matters." Eleanor looked at Devin and signed one more thing. He didn't translate out loud, just signed back. A private conversation between two people who understood what it meant to fight to be heard. But the meaning was written on both their faces. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for stepping in." The story didn't end in that boardroom. In many ways, it was just beginning. Within 24 hours, security footage from the meeting had leaked, with Eleanor's permission. The video went viral. 10 million views in 48 hours, 20 million by week's end. The image of a 10-year-old black boy standing up to executives, translating for a deaf billionaire, exposing fraud and defending dignity, resonated across every demographic. The New York Times ran it front page. 10-year-old interpreter exposes boardroom fraud, gives voice to deaf billionaire. CNN picked it up. Good Morning America invited Devin, Rosa, Alicia, and Eleanor for an interview. Devin translated the entire segment, with Alicia on his lap, occasionally signing questions that made the hosts tear up. The hashtag Justice for Devin trended within hours, but Devin himself redirected it. In every interview, every post, he changed the narrative. It wasn't about him. It was about deaf voices matter, about every voice matters, about building a world where communication barriers didn't become excuses for exclusion. Bradford Sterling's fall was swift and complete. The FBI confirmed everything in Eleanor's audit. $2.3 million in fraudulent expenses, fake invoices, embezzled funds through shell companies. He was arrested within a week, indicted on 15 counts. His wife filed for divorce. His yacht club membership was revoked. His face became shorthand for corporate greed and casual racism. Other companies where he held board positions cut ties immediately. His Manhattan reputation was destroyed. The man who'd believed privilege and pedigree made him untouchable learned that some things couldn't be bought or inherited. He would plead guilty to avoid trial, accept a 3-year sentence, and be ordered to pay back every dollar plus damages. But the real punishment was simpler. Everyone knew what he'd done. Everyone knew a 10-year-old had exposed him. For Devin and his family, changes came more gently, but no less profound. Eleanor wrote a check the day after the meeting. $50,000, full scholarship to Manhattan's most prestigious interpreter training program, reserved for Devin when old enough. Until then, money for private ASL tutoring, education expenses, anything needed. More immediately, she wrote another check. $25,000 for Alicia's cochlear implant consultation and initial procedures. Rosa cried for an hour when Eleanor handed it to her, signing through Devin. "Your daughter deserves every opportunity. Let me help." Richard offered Rosa a new position, Community Outreach Coordinator for Blackwood Enterprises. Salary, $65,000 yearly, full benefits, 9-to-5 schedule, no more overnight shifts. Her job would be building bridges between the company and communities they served, ensuring voices like hers, voices usually unheard in corporate spaces, had a seat at the table. Rosa quit her restaurant job that night. For the first time in 7 years, she'd have a schedule letting her see her children before bedtime. Within 3 months, the family moved from their cramped Brooklyn one-bedroom to a spacious two-bedroom in a better neighborhood. Alicia started at a new school with a full-time ASL interpreter and deaf education specialists. Devin stayed at PS 122 because he loved his teachers, but he started a program there, teaching free ASL classes to any student who wanted to learn. 200 kids signed up the first semester. Devin became the youngest certified community interpreter in New York State, granted a special waiver due to exceptional skills and clear need for his services. He volunteered 10 hours weekly at nonprofits, interpreting for deaf families who couldn't afford professional services. He was interviewed by Gallaudet University's Youth Outreach Program, asked to speak at a National Association of the Deaf conference, invited to the White House for a ceremony celebrating young activists. But his favorite work happened every Saturday and Sunday at the Harlem Community Center, where he taught ASL to anyone who wanted to learn, children and adults, hearing and deaf, people with deaf family members, and people who just believed language was a bridge worth building. Miss Patricia came to every class, sitting in back with tears of pride. Eleanor's affordable housing project broke ground 6 months after that meeting. The ceremony was massive. 300 families, many already selected for first-round units, local politicians, community leaders, news crews. Eleanor stood at center, flanked by Richard, Devin, Alicia, and Rosa. When it was time for her speech, she signed, and Devin translated, his voice carrying across the crowd through microphones. "This building is not named after me," Eleanor signed, and Devin spoke. "It's named after the people who taught me what matters. It's called the Anderson Community Center for Deaf Services." Devin's eyes went wide. He hadn't known. Rosa gasped, covering her mouth. Alicia, understanding enough, started crying. The community center would house not just apartments, but a full-time ASL education program, free interpreter training for low-income students, deaf-owned businesses given priority for ground-floor retail, a model for inclusive community development. Blackwood Enterprises transformed under Eleanor's renewed leadership. Every board meeting now had professional ASL interpreters. The company actively recruited deaf and hard-of-hearing employees at every level, from entry to executive positions. They partnered with 5 Harlem schools, sponsoring ASL programs and interpreter training. Within a year, over 300 kids learned basic ASL through Blackwood-funded programs. Dr. Wilson took personal responsibility for mentoring Devin, teaching him about business and financial literacy. She introduced him to community leaders, activists, educators, helped him understand that the voice he'd found, both literal and the platform given, carried responsibility. "Use it wisely," she told him. "Use it to lift others up." Devin did. He spoke at schools about disability rights and inclusion, wrote articles for education journals about ASL education importance in hearing schools, testified before city council about funding for interpreter services in public hospitals and courts. He was 10, then 11, then 12. His voice never wavered. Everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone deserves dignity. Communication is a right, not a privilege. 1 year after that boardroom meeting, Devin returned to the Harlem Community Center where he'd first learned ASL. He sat at the same table where Miss Patricia had taught him. He set up a framed photograph. Miss Patricia, who'd passed 6 months earlier, had left him a letter. "You kept the promise. You gave voice to the voiceless. I'm so proud of who you've become." A young boy, maybe 7, approached nervously. "Excuse me, are you Devin Anderson?" Devin smiled. "I am." "My little brother is deaf. He's 4. I want to learn to talk to him. Can you teach me?" Devin pulled out a chair. "Of course. Let me show you something. This is the sign for I love you. Let's start there." The voiceover returns one final time, quiet and powerful. Sometimes the most important voice in the room is the one nobody invited. Sometimes the greatest change comes from the smallest person. Sometimes all it takes is one brave child to remind us, every person matters. Every voice counts. And true communication isn't about ears or mouths or perfectly formed words. It's about hearts willing to listen, hands willing to bridge gaps, refusing to let anyone be invisible. On screen, text appears, "Today, over 500 children have learned ASL through Anderson Community Center programs. Eleanor Blackwood's affordable housing has expanded to 3 additional New York locations. Devin Anderson is now 15 and has interpreted for over 2,000 deaf individuals in legal, medical, and educational settings. The conversation continues. The final image is Devin and Alicia, now 13 and 9, signing to each other at a community event. They're laughing, hands moving in perfect synchronization. Around them, dozens of children, hearing and deaf, are communicating in ASL. The camera slowly pulls back. The community center is full of life, full of voices in every language and form, full of people who've been heard, been seen, been valued. One child stepped in, and the world shifted.